So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put in, again, this is a webinar series, and I'm going to put in the link that y'all can go to sign up for the rest of the webinars if y'all have not already. And just want to make sure, can everybody hear me? Because my internet might be running a little bit slow.
I can hear you, Adam.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
All right, Liz, can you look up if you go to our Randolph page, and there should be the pinned page for the rest of the webinars posted on there. If you could just put that in the chat, that would be great. And we'll get that up to running here shortly, but get back to my notes here. But again, just thank everybody for coming out. When we get those posted, we will start all these webinars at 7 o'clock on the Eastern Standard Time. And we have 4 more coming up after this one. So December 5th, we'll have the hoof help. January 9th, we'll have opportunities for sheep and solar farms. February 6th, we'll do a webinar on livestock guardian animals, and then we'll finish up on March 6th with pasture management for small ruminants. And again, I know this one is Goats 101, and if you have sheep or just have goats or have a combination of both, all these webinars are will work for both sheep and goats. So just keep a reminder of that. So if you need to, just join both, because it's all small ruminants, and a lot of things can be crossed between sheep and goats. So again, this is Goats 101, and before we get started, I got a few housekeeping rules. If you don't mind, please make sure your audio is off, just so we don't get any feedback off anything while the presenters are presenting. I'm fixing to launch a pre-poll, and we'll do another poll towards the end. So I'll go and get that pre-poll started. So if you don't mind, just fill that out. That kind of gives us some kind of information on what, kind of what we're doing, what we can do to improve all these webinars that we're doing. So if you don't mind, fill that out as we get started. And one thing we are trying to do is keep track of everybody who is participating in these webinars. So if you can put in the chat where you're from, and if you're from North Carolina, just make sure you put your county so we can kind of keep track of that. And we're going to get started here in a second, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker. It's going to be Dalton Suits. He's the livestock agent in Chatham County. After that, we'll go to Andy Burlingham. He's the livestock agent in Pitt County. And then we'll finish up with Stephanie Carter. And Stephanie runs a goat dairy down in Rayford, North Carolina called Ithaca Acres. So we'll go through those 3 presenters tonight. And if you have any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat, but we will have a Q&A answer session at the end. So at that time, if you don't mind, just finish doing that pre-poll and put it where you're from in the chat, and we will get started with Dalton. And Dalton, do you have access to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm working on it now. Can you see it?
Yep, I think we're good.
All right, good.
I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and we'll go ahead and get started with Dalton.
All right, you good to go, Adam?
Yep, we are good.
Okay, all right. So yeah, as Adam said, my name is Dalton Suits. I'm the livestock agent for Chatham County. So I'm just going to go over some kind of niche, however you want to say it, some specialty goat markets and some considerations. I'm also our farm is, I guess, considered a niche goat market or goat operation, and so I'm going to kind of give you some background on that and some tips and tricks. So kind of give you a really broad overview, kind of bird's eye view of some different specialty markets that there are that exist within the goat market, some considerations, and so yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. So what is a niche or niche market? It's basically, I kind of looked at the definition and kind of put it in my own words, but basically it's a more specific or a subset of a broader market or product to fill a more focused need. So when you're talking about goats, that could be the broader goat category of, just meat in general, people that raise goats, and take those market animals to market. So we're going to talk about some of the more specific or specialty categories that you can get within the goat market. So some really broad categories that these fit into would be like selling live animals, the meat from those animals, non-meat animal products, and then also some services. So diving a little bit deeper, so you can go into, you can have dairy products, you can have fiber production, meat products, pet and companion animal. You can have rare breeds in goats that you're breeding for. That is your business operation. You can have agritourism, you can have grazing services, and then livestock that's for show or seed stock. So that's just a few of the different categories or these kind of broader, more that focus down into more specific goat markets besides just the broad goat market of marketing those market animals. So jumping into the dairy products, so you've got milk, cheese, soaps, lotions, lip balms, creams, all of those fall into dairy products. There's not very many commercial goat dairies, large scale, so it typically tends to be more of a specialty market. There's a lot of homesteaders or small scale farms that are interested in this, and there is a market for offering some of those products, those value added products that you create from some of these dairy products. Our next category is fiber or cashmere or mohair for goats that can be used to create luxury yarns and textiles. And then those luxury yarns or textiles can be used to create products that are marketed as goat fiber products. So that's another market category that you can get into with the specialty market. Then you've got show livestock, which is basically breeding goats with the goal to focus on conformation and specific breed standards. So like if you're talking about boar goats or whatever breed of goat, each breed is going to have its own conformation or breed standards that they're going to follow, and that's going to kind of be the goal of that farm operation or that breeder is to they're going to focus on pedigrees, good genetics, conformation. This show stock is typically not what you'd see in like a commercial operation or an operation that's going for meat, because they're so focused on trying to make sure that those standards are met within those breeds. Then you've got the meat market. So you've got a few different options here. You've got direct to consumer, where people are marketing the animals directly to the consumer on a live basis. Then you've got, or even if they're processing those animals and having meat, and they're marketing that meat directly to the consumer. You've got where the ethnic or the cultural market. And the demand there, especially here in North Carolina, it seems to be a growing market. And then of course you've got where you can market those the meat products to like retail stores or restaurants. So you can sell those animals live on the hoof. Then you've also got, if you're going to facilitate either processing, so there's several processors here, custom processors in North Carolina that will process small ruminants. So you can focus on selling that live animal directly to the customer, and then all and that customer either process, if it's like an ethnic type deal, they'll process the animal themselves, or they'll facilitate someone else to process the animal. You can sell it to just an individual that wants to take that animal somewhere, and they purchase it from you. They pick up the animal, take it, and go process it somewhere, and they handle all that. Or you can run it as where you're kind of facilitating booking the appointment at the processor, and you're transporting that animal from your farm to the processor, and then the customer comes to the processor to pick up the meat. You can do it like that. You can also do it where you're going to the processor and you're processing several animals, but you want to keep that meat at your farm or your farm store, at your home, and you want to be able to take that meat and then sell it to retail customers, whether that's at a farmer's market or wherever that, or if you have a farm stand, wherever that may be. The only caveat to that is if you are handling the meat after it's been processed, you do have to have a meat handler's license in North Carolina, and that's pretty easy to get. You can get with your local cooperative extension agent, your livestock agent, and or North Carolina Department of Agriculture, and we'd be happy to help you to get a hold of that and the process with that. Another thing, if you're talking about the custom or the ethnic market, is keeping in mind this ethnic holiday calendar. The ethnic market, all these different holidays for different ethnicities and religions. All these calendars really control the demand of the market and as well as the price of the animals. So understand, you can see this one, some of these holidays go on like a lunar calendar, so they're not always the same time every single year. So that's why they've broken it down into multiple years, and you can get this calendar on there's several small ruminant websites. You can just Google ethnic holiday calendar small ruminants and pull it up. But it's a good idea to put these things on your calendar to understand whatever your market is or your customer base, and understanding educate yourself on these holidays, because there's different, depending on the holiday, they may want a heavier animal, they may want a lighter animal, they might want an unblemished animal, an intact animal. So understanding what those holidays are and these markets and time frames, and how you need to adjust your management to meet some of these markets. So I just thought that'd be a good resource for you guys to have, especially if you're interested in any of the meat side of things, because even just the demand for and the purchase price of animals is going to increase when these holidays are pushing the demand of small ruminants, including goats, up during these high demand times for these holidays. And then of course you've also got your pet and companion animal. The people are solely focused on having goats as pets, so they don't always have an intent to breed. They may or they may not. They just want a couple goats, just like people. You have dog and cat people. So that's another category that you can focus on, and that's kind of what our farm. We don't really try to necessarily, but I mean that seems to be what our majority of our customer base is folks that want to have pet companion animals, small farm, just like you'd want to go buy a puppy. They want to buy little kids. So that's seems to be a lot of what makes up the market out there. And then of course you got services, so you can offer services. There's you can have a business put together where you go and set up temporary fencing for, it could be a homeowner, it could be a community, it could be businesses, and they'll pay you to set up that fencing, and then also provide the goats, and those goats control weeds or just graze, so that it doesn't have to be mowed. And then that can help control with fire control, and then, like I said, just weed control. So that's a service that some folks offer, which is kind of more of a niche market. All right, so now I just want to kind of get into a little bit more about my operation. This is a drone picture from our farm. We run right along the creek side, but and that's where we get our name from. But I just want to tell you a little bit about my background. Like I said, some tips and tricks that I've learned. We've been doing it for almost, a little over 11 years now. We've been in small ruminants. We have sheep and goats, but tonight I'm only going to talk about our goats, which is the myotonic or the fainting goats. So I'm going to show you a quick video of some of our goats fainting. It's got some age on it. Let's see if we can get it to play. May not have sound, but basically, if you're not familiar with myotonic or fainting goats, they have a genetic defect that we've kind of bred and focused on, and basically it's kind of like a muscle spasm. They'll fall over if they get scared or excited. They might fall over, their muscles tense up and lock up, and anywhere from 10 to 20, 30 seconds, depending on the goat. And they freeze up, and sometimes it's not even that they fall all the way over, but they might get stiff-legged and kind of walk zigzag back and forth. But that's kind of what the myotonic or the fainting goats, that's what they're known for. So I'll kind of tell you a little bit about the structure of our business. So the way we do things, like I said, we've been doing it for a little over 11 years now. So we focus on, all of our animals are registered animals. And like I said, we're focusing on it tends to be more people that are companion animals, pet animals. Some people you can breed myotonic or fainting goats in with meat goats because of they faint, they have more muscle. So we have a few customers that do, purchase some of our bucks to breed in with theirs to kind of get some more muscle mass and get some more meat on their bones. But how we operate, we function a lot from our website. And so that's kind of how we do a lot of our business. We kind of think of like Amazon. So we've got our kind of, I guess you could call it sale catalog, but once we have our kids born, we'll put all pictures on there. We'll put information like sire, dam, whether they're polled, which is just naturally hornless, or whether they have horns, birth dates, if they want to look up, the sire and dam registration number to pull like pedigrees, things like that. We'll put all that information, price, all that stuff on our website. And that way folks have all that information available. And then we also have a functioning waiting list. So we'll take people that come to the website. There's a button on there, a tab that they can click wait list, and they can sign up on the waiting list. So if they come at a time that we don't have, because we don't always have kids, year round, they can sign up to be placed on the waiting list, and that kind of holds their place in line. So every time we have a kitten, we'll go through our waiting list and start at the top of the list and work our way through each person, and then they'll get to be able to get kind of pick of the litter of once it gets to their spot in line. And so that's a good way of being able to kind of retain that customer base when you don't have a product that's available to your customers right away, is to keep a waiting list that you can contact. And so that's been worked really well for us to be able to go back to those people, and if it's 5 months later when we finally have kids or wing kids, whatever, and we can go back to them and say, look, we've got these available, check out our website. And that a lot of times those people do end up purchasing the kids that we have for sale on there. So another thing is we function is using that email list that we have. So we have a place on our website where folks, they come there, if they don't, maybe they're not ready to sign up on the waiting list yet, they're still not sure about it, we'll have what we call like a goat alert. And so people that aren't ready to be committed to be put on the waiting list, they can sign up for the goat alert. And when we have, let's say we go through our waiting list and we sell everything, we still have some left over. Or if we just have some randomly and we don't have a waiting list at the time, then we'll send them out to that group. And that gives folks another way to not necessarily have to commit to something, but they're still able to be looped in and know what we have available. So that's kind of how we function. Once we get to their spot in line on the waiting list, we'll contact them. And like I said, we put all the information that we can. We take a lot of pictures of each goat or kid, and we have those posted on there. So of each side of the animal, of the front of the animal, and then sometimes we even include like sire and dam pictures on there, so people can get an idea of what they might be full grown. But so we'll try to put as much information as we can on there, and then when we contact that person, they're able to go through, just like if they're shopping on Amazon, and go through there and sort through, pick out the colors that they want, and they can say, we're interested in XYZ. We number all of them have IDs, and so they can tell us what ID numbers they're interested in. And then that way it makes it easier on us when they want to come to the farm and take a look at them. We can pull those numbers and kids and put them in a smaller pen, and when they can come and take a look at them without having to just group everybody together, and it doesn't overwhelm the customer trying to make a selection. We found that that's worked really well for us. So with these niche markets, is the first step is making sure that there is a market for the product that you have, or that you think you want to, whatever product you think you want to offer. Like I said, that could be value added products from, like if you're doing the dairy, if you're doing lotions or whatever, or it could be, so you're selling livestock. So like us, we're selling breeding stock or pets to people. So identifying your customer base and making sure there's a customer base in your area, or people that are willing to buy the product in your location, and then just seeing what niche market that falls into. So the next step is doing like a cost analysis. So whether you're thinking about getting goats, or whether you're already in the bandwagon, it's always a really good idea to look at your income versus your expenses. So look and say, okay, if I have, based on your kidding percentage, how many kids you suspect you're going to have in a year. Looking at what that income is going to bring. Doing your own research in the market. So looking in your area, or even you might have to broaden your area if you have such a demand in your area that there's not many product there. You can do some more research on a broader scale and kind of determine what that product is bringing price wise, and get a decent idea of what you think you can get. And put all this can be in a spreadsheet, on paper, there's apps, whatever you want to use, but just make sure that you are doing this. So like I said, if you're just jumping into it, I'd recommend put all this stuff on paper before even buying your first animals. But if you're already in the boat, it's never too late to do a cost analysis and take a look at your operation and see how things are looking, and then looking at your expenses. So feed expenses, vet bills, minerals, any of those types of things, putting all that stuff on a list. Anything that's going to cost, if you're paying somebody labor wise to come in, maybe you want to put your own time on there. Facilities, so if you have a barn, and depreciation, all that stuff you can put in here and take a look at it. You can get as tedious as you want to, or as broad as you want to, but having some kind of idea of where you stand cost wise. I know this presentation is on niche goat marketing, but you can't help but overlook the fact that most of us are trying to make a business out of this, or at least try not to go in the hole. So I want to talk a little bit about business, but and then also just looking at, after you've done your cost analysis, is this something that can be a business, or does this need to be more of a hobby? You want to classify it more as a hobby. And so we treat those two a little different. When you go to work, you don't necessarily treat that the same way as your hobby that you do for fun. So it might give you an idea of where you want to stand financially, how much you want to invest into this, whether it's a hobby or a business. So that's always a good idea, is to do a cost analysis. But we're going to assume that you've done your cost analysis, and we're going, as Monopoly goes, we're going to proceed to go, and hopefully you'll collect $200. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. So, but we're going to go ahead with that. And so establishing what or when. So what does your customer want? Some examples of this, like I said, we were talking about the ethnic market. So if we're talking about, in that case, we're talking about a meat market. So like I said, paying really close attention to those ethnic holidays and those specifications of live animals. Like I said, it might be an animal that doesn't have a blemish, or they've got a really specific weight range that they want for that particular holiday. A lot of those holidays, they might want to be able to consume, a family might want to consume a whole carcass, in a day's time. So they don't want it too large or too small. They want to be able to feed their whole family. So understanding, doing your research ahead of time and knowing what that is, but then also realizing that's going to change your whole management schedule. So when you're going to breed, when you're going to kid, when you're going to wean, and how you're going to feed them to get them up to that market weight that you're going to sell these at. And so speaking to that same ethnic holiday market, you're also going to have periods of high demand based on those holidays. And it's going to be really seasonality or focusing on those holidays is going to change the demand and when you're going to want to focus on having that product available to them. So moving into like more of like our case is in the pet market. There's a really big difference in commercial livestock and like pet people that have just pets. So your dogs and your cats. You can think about just taking your dogs and cats to the vet versus how you treat your livestock at home. You don't always run to load the animals up and take them to the vet every time you have a little issue. But I mean, it's considering what when you're talking to those customers, especially with the pet or companion animal market, that they have a different idea of things and they may not necessarily be used to. So you just want to watch your phrasing and how you're wording things when you're talking to your customers, especially if they're in that pet companion animal. Like if you're talking about castration, some people prefer. So if we're selling an intact buck, we try to communicate that with the customer. So some don't realize why they should castrate and how. Like if you leave a buck intact and they're wanting to keep it as a pet that their kids are going to rub on and play on and then come inside, how you have that billy goat odor, and how if you don't castrate that's what you'll have. And then when you start talking about castration, you have to start talking about methods of castration depending on the age of the animal. So some of these animals, if you have the kids for a while and they're more mature, and banding may no longer be an option. You have to talk about there's surgical castration, and just communicating that really well and making sure things, because don't always assume that the person that you're talking to has the same background as you or the same understanding of those animals. Another thing for the pet or companion animal market is people want young animals and cute animals. So they want the small animals. They want to get them when they're as small as they can. In a commercial standpoint, nobody wants bottle babies, but in the pet and companion animal market, you can sell bottle babies all day long, depending on your customer base. But from what we've seen, anytime we have a bottle baby, we have people that want us to pull them off the dam to be able to raise them as bottle babies. So it's really really odd when you're thinking about it in a commercial market standpoint. So, but getting those animals so that you can market them wean them as soon as you can at a healthy age, and being able to get them into their hands, when they're still reasonably young. They don't want a really old animal that they have they want to kind of grow up with the animal and establish with it so that it gets accustomed to them. So just some considerations if you're talking about, the pet market. So for marketing your business or these niche markets, one thing that I would say, for us anyways, is a breeder directory. So depending on, like I said, registering your stock it depends on what market you're in. So, with the dairy, you may not necessarily have to market if your only focus is on getting milk and using that to turn into like a value added product like soap or something. So it's dependent on whatever niche market you're in. But like for us, it's beneficial to us. So being a part of your breed registry, like for us, it's the Myotonic Goat Registry, or the MGR. And so being a member of that, and once you're a member, a lot of times it's already included, or you might have to pay a little bit more, but you can be listed as a breeder on their directory page. So when people go to the Myotonic Goat Registry, or they Google fainting goats or whatever, and the registry page comes up, they can see a list of breeders from North Carolina, and you're listed there. So people have your contact information. That's a good way to market your farm. You've got social media marketing, so like creating like a Facebook page or Instagram or whatever, a farm page for your farm, to be able to advertise on there. And then of course, word of mouth. A caveat with that is make sure you're doing it right. It's worked really well for us, but if you're transparent with your customers and you try to provide them with all the information that you can, it's a really good way of marketing because folks talk to other people. They talk to their neighbors. Their neighbor sees that they've got a cute couple goats, and they want to know where they came from. And they'd say, we've got it from this breeder, and he was so helpful, and all these things. And so the word of mouth is a really good way to market your animals. Also, you've got small ruminant groups. So I know like we've got the small ruminant page, Facebook page for North NC State that's available. There's a lot, your local livestock associations. There's lots of like social media groups like on Facebook. There's a lot of times there's one like for your state and some for your counties. And you can get involved in some of those and talk to some of the breeders and just see what people are posting. That's a good way to get plugged in. And then of course also your breed registries also usually have like some type of group or meetings that they'll have, and being involved in those and just getting plugged into the small ruminant network is a good way to get your name out there. Just get talking with folks and they realize what you have. So that's another good option as well. So continuing with the marketing, like I said, we do a lot with our website. That's one of our main marketing. So when you first thing you do when you're looking for something and you want to buy it and you don't know where to go to it, you go to Google and you search in like fainting goats for sale in North Carolina. And so when you have a website and you have that up and running, people can easily be navigated to it, and they can have your contact information. And so like in our case, we have all of our goats that we have for sale on there, so they can easily see what you've got available. So it's really a really good marketing thing, as well as just a good information kind of portal. But so I mean nowadays, I mean it's you can get a website for pretty reasonable. You can YouTube it. They're not hard. They can be drag and drop, so they're not too big of an undertaking. There's you can get your it's called a domain name. So like it could be www.wolfpack.com or whatever, and that's the domain is the title that you're sharing with folks that direct them to your website. But there's all kinds of, like I said, drag and drop builders. So that's worked really well for us. And then also email. Like I said, we have that place on our website where if people they're ready for goats and then will sign up on our waiting list, they can sign up like that, and then we can send out mass emails to the folks that are on our waiting list or folks that are on our goat alert list that are ready to dive into. They're not quite ready to commit to our waiting list, but we can use all of these by collecting these email addresses and sending emails out to them. I mean, it can be as simple as just sending out an email and just doing like blind carbon copy and just including a blurb, and that can be some really good marketing. You don't necessarily have to have some kind of fancy email program to be able to do that, but it's a good way of marketing and getting your name back out there in front of those folks that they might have visited your website several months ago when they wanted goats and they still hadn't done anything yet. So it's a good way to get back in front of them. So it's a great way to circle back. So seed stock or establishing your initial herd, I would say don't jump in on the goat bandwagon too fast because there is a learning curve pending. So if you're first getting started in small ruminants, there's a lot to learn. I tell people that are in beef cattle, it's not as easy as just throwing them out there on the grass. So there's a lot to learn. So educating yourself as much as you can, coming to events like these, getting plugged into your local cooperative extension office and getting plugged into their events, and establishing a relationship with your local livestock agent. All really good ways to get involved. But like I said, just start small with your if you're just getting into small ruminants or goats or sheep, whatever it is, start with really small numbers, and you can always grow your flock. So you can always purchase stock from a reputable breeder. And like I said, you don't always want to you wouldn't necessarily want to go to a livestock auction to purchase breeding stock. You want to go to a reputable breeder and purchase your initial stock, and really focus on that breeder and the quality and speaking with other people, because whatever you get and you're going to start trying to retain females from that seed stock that you purchased, that's going to be the base of your genetics and the base of what you have to work with. So make sure to focus on that. But like I said, you can grow those numbers relatively quickly just by, like I said, you purchase an initial, even if it's just 2 does, and you keep those, and those have babies, and you can trade out bucks. You can purchase in new bucks to bring in new genetics, and you just keep retaining your females, and you can grow a herd relatively quickly. So don't get number crazy and jump in too quick, too fast. Like I said, there's a learning curve, and there's always something to learn with sheep and goats. So that would be my word of advice to you. So going into a little bit more, we talk about value added. Generally you think like value added products, as in like you're adding something to, like, let's say it's goat milk, and you're doing something with that goat milk to make it more valuable. Well, I think a value added is also is your branding and your marketing, or like your business as a whole. So like breed registration for us is something that adds value to our products because we're registered. Like in our case anyway, when we're talking about companion animal and then breeding stock, it adds value. We can all ask more for our livestock or our kids because they are registered, with the fainting goats, because they were on the rare breeders list, the Livestock Conservancy. So that helps us to be able to track pedigrees and stuff. So registration adds value to our product. Another category would be like biosecurity. So disease testing. We do that on our farm. We test for CL, CAE, and Johne's. I mean, we're negative for all three of those. That's something that you can draw the blood yourself and send it off to the lab and have it tested. But that's not necessary for every farm. Even if you're a commercial operation, that may not be justifiable. But for us, it seems to really help our customers. They place trust in us, knowing and understand that we have a really good biosecurity policy, and we're not just buying livestock from anywhere. And we have quarantine policies. So when we purchase new, even if we're bringing in a new buck to bring in new genetics, we quarantine those, make sure they're not sick or anything before we add them in with our herd. And so that way our buyers know that when they purchase kids from us, they're not going to be purchasing diseased or sick animals. So that helps us to add value to our product there. Our website, like I said, people are able to have additional information that they typically wouldn't have available to them. So if you're trying to call back and forth with somebody, let's say you're trying to just text them, let's say, if we have 25 kids available at one time, you can't, it's hard to communicate that with somebody over text or call and trying to send pictures back and forth. So I think that's something that adds value. We're able to ask more for our livestock because we can share all that information at one time. We share all, like I said, sire, dam, birth date, when they'll be weaned, when they'll be ready to be picked up. Like I said, whether they're polled, whether they're horned, all this information is available to them. And then of course we've also got that with like educational resources. So like we have some things that they might want to purchase before, if this is their first time owning goats or kids. Some things they might want to purchase and have on hand before they bring their kids home. So we'll have resources like that posted on our website. Frequently asked questions on there, and they can have all this information, and we can share that with our customers readily. And it's just a good resource to add. And I think that's something that just adds value to your product. And the biggest thing I would say is pictures, pictures, pictures. So I'm going to tell you guys, like I tell my parents. So everybody's got smartphones now, but everybody wants to pinch and zoom. And so as I tell my parents, whenever you pinch and zoom and start zooming in, you're losing quality. So when you're trying to take pictures of your livestock and they're way out in the field and you're trying to pinch and you zoom, 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 you're losing a lot of quality. And so that the picture quality is just not going to be there. It's going to be real pixelated and real grainy. And that doesn't appeal to your customer when they're trying to get an idea of the animal that they want to purchase or want to even come out to your farm and take a look at. If you don't have really good pictures, it can hurt you. So that's really a good selling feature is getting you a good. So I guess let me back up. The tip would be if you're using your smartphone, don't pinch and zoom or hit the plus button on your phone to zoom, zoom, zoom. Use your feet, walk forward or away from the animal to be able to take that picture. Don't use the zoom feature, and that way you're going to keep the full quality by walking forward or backwards. Even better than a smartphone would be if you can get you like a DSLR camera or like one of those cameras with the zoom. You can zoom in all you want to with those and max the zoom out, and you're still not going to lose quality. So that's something that really helps us is having really good pictures. And sometimes you can even include video, but a lot of times pictures, we have pictures of both sides of the animals and the front of the animal. The quality's good, so you can see eye color, things like that. So that's a really good tip that I would recommend. And then lastly is customer service or technical support. That's a really big one for us. You can have customer reviews and things like that based on how your customer service and I would say technical support. So when folks come, making sure you're providing them with resources. A successful customer is a happy customer. A customer that fails is just going to end up in frustration and a not so happy customer. So anything that you can do to offer resources to them. So like I said, you can talk with your local livestock agent. There's plenty of resources out there for managing goats and even sheep, and how to prepare that person You want to do the best that you can to give them all the resources that you can to set them up for success. So that I mean, if they take goats home and then they start getting sick and they don't understand why, it could be, maybe they're wormy and they don't understand the fact that they can do FAMACHA and check their eyelids to see if they're anemic or not. And so anything that you can do to educate them with just basic information. So linking your customers to those resources, whether it's sharing them with email, whether you're printing them out and hand them to them when you come, but just walking through step by step with those customers. If they're new, if you're talking about like pet companion animals, a lot of times they don't have the background, so focusing more on with those customers, sharing just the basics, how they have to have forage, and if they don't have grass, they've got to have hay, and just the basic stuff that we take for granted can be really helpful and can help avoid situations with your customers that are buying kids that don't have a background. It can help avoid some things, but it helps them feel I don't know what the word is, cared for. Or they feel like they can trust you, and then they feel better about themselves when they have livestock that they can. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but basically that they can trust you, and that they know that I'm losing my train of thought. They're trusting you, and that they have the resources they need to be able to manage the goats to be able to, or the goats to be able to succeed. So whether that's connecting them with their local cooperative extension agent, their livestock agent in their county. So like I said, knowing when to connect them with them. So if it's not something that you're comfortable with, you don't have to know all the ins and outs of small ruminants. You can connect them look up online who their agent is and help them get connected with those and establish a relationship with them. You can share the small ruminant events just like this one, and get them connected, maybe get them on an email list of small ruminant events for cooperative extension or wherever that may be. And so this means that you need to also learn too. So if you're going to be educating your customers, you need to have a good knowledge base too. So it's attending these webinars, having a relationship with cooperative extension, your livestock agent, and learning as much as you can so that you can then pass that information along to them. So with that being said, know when to connect them to someone. So like I said, don't try to answer questions you don't know. Feel free to connect them with a livestock agent or their large animal veterinarian. So you have access to this same team. So you've got access to your livestock agent, specialist, and more, and then large animal vets. And making sure they're finding a large animal vet that they can call on before they have an emergency. So sharing that information with them, but also sharing that this team that you have access to, make sure that they're aware that they have this same team that they also have access to. Another point that I have is preparing registration applications or certificates. So making sure that when the customer comes, like what we'll do is print everything out, have it in a folder with our business card. We'll have, whether we're transferring a animal that's already been registered, and we'll have everything filled out on our end where all they have to do is sign and put in their information, and we give them instructions on how to do that and how to mail it off. The more information you can provide with them and offer them, even if they say, you tell them, if you go to register this animal, feel free to give me a call and I'll be happy to walk you through how to do this. But anytime you can give guidance like that, it just lets the customer, put more trust in you, and they have a better relationship with you, and so it works out better for you in the end. So focusing on that, like I said, just being able to rely when you don't know the answer to questions, and contacting the people that do know. So you don't have to know everything. And so that's all I have for tonight. So we'll hold the questions to the end, but I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me.
Thank you, Dalton, for that. That's a good presentation. Again, there's Dalton's contact information if you need to get a hold of him. Just a couple things that we did forget to mention, or I did. We are recording this webinar. And so if you've been with us before, you know that we do upload these to YouTube. We'll post that channel here towards the end so everybody will have it. So all this webinar will be posted as we get them done and recorded and edited, and we'll post them back again to YouTube. And we will share a link that'll have all of them towards the end if y'all stay with us long enough. But we will do that. And again, if you hadn't put in where you're from, don't forget to put that in the chat, and we will turn it over to Andy Burlingham, who is the extension agent in Pitt County.
Good evening, everyone. As Adam said, my name is Andy Burlingham, And I've been working with goats here in Pitt County for working in an extension agent here in Pitt County for about 13 years now. I also have a farm where I raise meat goats, boar goats mostly. Got my first experience with goats and kind of in 2000 when goats first kind of started to become popular here in Eastern North Carolina. Helping my brother who was showing a few goats, was younger than me, showing a few goats. And then when I moved back and started my farm after college here, I kind of jumped into raising a few meat goats. So we're going to talk a little about some of the are goats right for you? A lot of people say, "Oh, I think I want to get goats," and I talk with them, and maybe sometimes goats are not always right for every situation. A lot of people want to get goats because they're cute and you see funny videos all the time on the internet with goats. But goats do have quite a bit of management and some requirements for pasture and that sort of thing. So we're going to talk about some of those things and make sure that if you're thinking about getting goats, that you find the right kind of goats and that goats are right for you. So why would you want to raise goats? Goats can be raised because they work well on small acreage. You don't need a huge area to keep goats. You can have about 4 to 6 goats per acre of land. If you're trying mostly just maintain them on grass, but if you're adding supplemental feed, if you only have a half acre or so, you can have a few goats, and then of course corresponds back to the body size and type of goat that you're raising too, is how many goats you can have. But goats work on smaller acreage. They work multi-purpose. You can get multiple different kinds of streams of income off goats or achieve multiple different goals with goats. I get a lot of folks that have brushy woodlots, a cutover area of land that they've had, logged in the past. It's kind of growing up in brush or wanting to clear out. Like, hey, we want to run some goats out here. Then you can, get that purpose achieved of clearing the land and moving some of that brushy stuff back, along with raising some goats. Or we have folks, we're talking about a little bit, and Dalton talked about, some different economic streams, like, you have dairy goats. If you have dairy goats, you can also be selling kids into the meat market. You can be selling kids into the pet market. You've been selling kids into the breeding market. So you have multiple streams of income. If you have young children, goats are a great way to introduce them to raising livestock. Goats are very safe. They're very easy. They're small, and kids work very well with goats. So kids, they work very well together, and they're great for young kids to play with, and a great opportunity for them to learn about livestock. And goats can be profitable. There is money to be made in goats. There are many challenges. We're going to talk a little longer in the presentation that can challenge that profitability if we don't manage or make great decisions. But there is profitability to be made when raising goats. So let's talk a little about goats in general and some of the characteristics about goats. One of the biggest ones is in their habitat, how they like to eat. Particularly here in the Southeast, we want to stick goats out a lot of times on a grass pasture, right? We see cows on pasture and sheep on pasture. We think goats, we'll throw them out on pasture. But actually, grass is the least preferred. If goats would prefer to be eating at head height or above, and they prefer to be eating things like brush and trees and weeds, things with large, broad leaves, are actually their preferred type of forage over grass. Yes, they will eat grass if that's all they have left, but they prefer those things with large, broad leaves and that are at head height or higher. And this has a lot to do with the kind of digestive system there. So goats fall into the ruminant category. They have that 4-compartment stomach that allows them to digest those very fibrous plants that we can't digest very well. And we compare goats amongst all the other ruminants, such as sheep and cattle, but we also can compare them to things like deer, and they're actually much more like deer. They have a smaller size stomach for their body size and their pass through. The amount of time the food spends in their rumen and in their stomach system it moves through faster than other animals. And so goats are actually what we call protein concentrators. They are very selective in their grazing. They can distinguish and know which part of the plant or which plants are higher in protein and energy, and they are very selective in their grazing. If you watch a goat graze, they have very flexible front top lips, and they have what we call a very prehensile tongue. They can use that tongue to go out and select certain leaves and certain portions of the plant that are only the most nutritious, the most tender part of the plant. So they are very selective grazers, and this can offer some challenges and opportunities when we're trying to manage goats. Goats are kind of a light built animal. They're not super heavy muscled. They have for their amount of frame and bone length they have, they're actually fairly light muscled. They tend to be later maturing animals if you compare them to other small ruminants such as sheep or even cattle. For their size, they mature a little bit later. They really don't reach mature body sizes, so they're close to 2 years old. Some breeds of goats don't reach sexual maturity until a little bit later in their lifespan. So, in that 9, 10, 11 months old before they're reaching sexual maturity. But that varies amongst the different breeds of goats. So there's some variability in that. But in general, goats, they're just a little bit later maturing in their growth type than comparing them, say, to people who raise sheep. If you're raising sheep and goats, you'll notice that big difference. Goats are very independent and inquisitive. And goats are known for that personality. That's why people like goats. They're very personable. They do funny things and they make silly decisions. They want to come see you and jump around and be on top of stuff and stick their nose in places sometimes where they shouldn't be sticking their nose and tend to get caught in fences or up on top of falling off of things because they climbed up on something they thought they could get on and hurt themselves. So they have this attitude that's very fun to watch, interact with, but sometimes can be also detrimental to their own well-being at times. When compared to sheep, goats have a very high mineral requirement, and particularly in copper. They just have it, so you have to be a little bit more specific and on the kind of feed we feed them. So, when you go to buy feed at the feed store or whatever, you got different options. You got all stock and you got, and then you look compare, we got goat feed, which is like a lot more expensive per bag. And that's because it has more protein in it because their digestive system moves faster. They need more protein, but they also need to have a higher mineral content and need to maintain their health. And particularly, we're going to be talking about hoof health in our next session. And for goats, when they get low, if they're not getting enough of the minerals they need, their hoof health declines and their hair coat looks rough and that sort of thing. So goats have a very high mineral requirement. Probably one of the biggest challenges, actually the biggest challenge for adult goats, especially here in the Southeast, is they're very parasite prone. Goats, if you go back in time, originate from a high desert savanna environment. They are animals of a dry shrub environment. That's where most goat breeds originate from. In an area that would be low humidity, low moisture, kind of an arid environment. You bring them into a tropical environment where they, especially if we're trying to graze grasses at a low head height, they pick up a lot of parasites, in particular one called the Haemorrhagis contortus or barber pole worm, which lives in the digestive system or lives in the stomach and actually sucks the blood of the animals their host. It can cause anemia and even cause death. And it does goats, because they come from a dry environment, were not subject to those parasites and do not have the tolerance to parasites as compared to sheep and cattle and other grazing animals we see. So they are very prone to these parasites, and it is the number one challenge when trying to manage adult goats is maintaining low parasite levels in goats. But goats do have a very high heat tolerance. And this makes them, where we can grow them here in the Southeast. They don't have issues with the heat and the humidity in the summertime affecting their growth as frequently as you might think about sheep and cattle. In fact, their physiology of how they store their body fat, their type of skin they have really makes them much more adapted to high heat. Goats store their body fat internally and rather externally. So if you compare them to, say, cattle or sheep, they lay down body fat between their skin and their muscle over the top of their skeleton to give insulation against hot weather or against cold weather and wet environments. Whereas goats, they store their body fat internally around their organs, and really their skin kind of lays right on top of their muscle. So they are easily able to cool their bodies off. But The but in that is it makes them less tolerant of cold, and particularly cold and wet conditions. When we talk about shelter, shelter is much more important when we're raising goats than sheep or cattle, because they need to be out of the environment when we have cold, particularly cold rain and snowy conditions, wet, cold conditions, because they lose body heat very rapidly. And especially young goats, or goats that are in thin body condition, or goats that are any kind of stress. They're very prone and to wet and cold conditions. And if you compare them to other animals, goats will be the first one to run to the barn at the slightest sign of a little bit of rain coming down. You watch them; they'll be running to the ground, running to the barn to get out of the rain, because they do not like to be wet, because they chill very easily. Dalton covered this a little bit. We're going to kind of cover a little bit the same ground. I'll kind of talk about it from a little different angle. Is when we're getting ready to go into goats, we got to know what kind of goats do we want, and what's our focus we want. And Dalton covers a little bit. So we, some of the options we have: meat production, dairy production, fiber production. If we're going, maybe we want to focus on selling breeding stock to other producers, or selling show animals. We're going to talk a little bit about meat production. This is probably the avenue that most folks, that and dairy, we're kind of wanting to go when they're thinking about raising goats. And the thing about meat, the meat side of it, is all production systems send animals into the meat stream. Whether that you're raising, it doesn't matter if you're raising those little myotonics, if you're raising little Nigerian dwarf goats, if you're raising dairy goats, you're raising cashmere goats, or you're raising, just other goats. You're going to have animals, when you cull them, excess offspring, animals that do not meet the requirements and really are not of a quality you want to be selling to someone else for breeding stock. All those animals are going to channel into, or go into the meat channel, very likely. Some of those markets that we and Dalton talked about it, is we sell the kid goats, those feeder kids, or those market kids, maybe ranging from 35 pounds if you're selling really in the small ethnic market, maybe going up to bigger weights. In some of the other markets, 80, 90 pounds, kind of a finished goat. We talked about those different ethnic markets. There's definitely lots of different streams and different options for selling goats into the ethnic markets. Or, as y'all talked about, selling that, you have them butchered and you get a meat handler's license and you sell that meat. But the important thing about in the meat trade is making sure we select goats that have the traits. If we're going to focus on meat, that's going to have the traits that are going to be the most profitable. And those traits we want to select for are growth. We want to know how fast can we get that kid goat from being born to the weight we want to sell that at, whether that's 35 pounds, 60 pounds, 80 pounds, whatever weight we want to sell. How fast, how efficient can we get that animal to that weight? Because the slower they grow, or the longer amount of time it takes them to reach that weight, that's more time we're putting feed in, and that's eating away from the profit. We want muscle. We're selling meat. We want to select the breeds of goats that have more muscle expression. And we want consistency, especially if we're selling them. When we go sell those animals, we want every time, we want the animal to be of a similar body size, at the same age. We want to have a similar amount of fat on it, similar amount of muscle on it when we go to sell it. So we want some consistency in the quality of that animal we're taking, whether we're taking it to the stockyard, or we're selling it when they come to buy off the farm, or we're selling that meat product, especially when we're selling that meat product in the farmer's market. Someone comes buys, some goat chops from you one week, and they come back a month later and they want to pack another pack. They expect it to be the same kind of size and quality in that cut, or in those goat chops when they buy it from you at the farmer's market a month later. So when we're thinking about getting goats for growing for meat, the common breeds we see in the United States is, first of all, is the Boer goat. The Boer goat is a breed that comes from South Africa. They are one of the heaviest muscle breeds of goats, probably the most popular meat goat. If you go to buy a meat goat in the United States, it's going to have some sort of pretty high Boer influence, most likely. Coming from South Africa, a breed that was developed in South Africa, a very dry, arid environment, they are extremely susceptible to parasites. Of all the breeds of meat goats we have available, and really across most all species or all breeds of goats across all different types, Boer goats are some of the most susceptible to parasites. That makes them very challenging to grow in the Southeast. But they are the fastest growing, and they have the most muscle mass for their body size compared to other meat goat breeds as a general as compared against breeds. Probably the second most common breed of meat goat we'll see is the Kiko goat. The Kiko meat goat comes from New Zealand. New Zealand being a wetter environment, the Kiko goats are more parasite resistant. They tend to be a little bit larger frame than Boer goats, but they are lighter muscle. They don't have the muscle mass on them as we see in the Boer goats. A lot of producers, but they're more hardy, have less foot issues, and they tend to be much more parasite resistant and need a little less babying a lot of times. Boer goats, a lot of times, are considered to be kind of higher maintenance goats. And so a lot of times you'll see people that are raising straight Kikos, or they're maybe mixing Kiko in with Boer goats to try to improve that parasite resistance while still maintaining some of that extra growth and muscle mass we find from the Boer goat breed. Say, 30 years ago and 40 years ago, the most common breed of goat we would find in the United States was the Spanish goat. The Spanish goat originates from, it's kind of a similar story to Texas Longhorn cattle, from the southwestern part of the United States. They were brought in by the Spanish. They were kind of dropped off. They went semi-feral. They learned to live and adapt in an environment without very little management. They were very large framed goats, but they were very late maturing. They're slow growing. They take, they don't reach full body maturity size until 2 or 3 years of age. And so they're just a lot really slow growing goats. And if you're trying to make that profitability happen and reach a certain weight, at a fairly young age, Spanish goats don't always fit the situation for doing that in meat production, but they are extremely hardy. They're very parasite resistant. They are very have very good have very few hoof issues. They're very adaptable to very many different types of environments, but they are kind of slow growing to reach that mature body size. The most common type of goat we'll see in meat production is going to be some sort of crossbred goat. It's going to be a mixture of multiple breeds. A lot of times you're going to have some percentage of the Boer goat in there. You may have some Spanish. You may have some of that Kiko. You may even have some of the dairy breeds mixed in there quite often that we're going to talk about here in just a minute as we talk about the dairy breeds. But a lot of times we have some sort of mixed breed goat that we're going to be using. That mixing of different breeds gives something called hybrid vigor. Those animals outperform a purebred goat of the similar trait across most of the traits we look at from growth and hardiness. So a lot of times we have a crossbred goat. The thing we don't maintain in a crossbred goat is consistency, especially if we're mixing multiple breeds together and we're using maybe even if we're using crossbred or non-purebred goats as our buck. On non-purebred does, we get a lot of variety in the type and kind of kids we may be having born and are raising. Dairy goats, it's a high labor. It takes a lot of labor. We're going to talk a little bit about dairy here in a little bit from one of our producers, but it's one of those things every day. You got to be out there milking that goat. There's no time when she's in milk. You don't get to take a break. It's also very specialized by breed. We'll talk about that here in a minute for it. Dalton kind of covered the markets. There's a lot of different ways we can market that milk. But the important traits when we're selecting for milk goats, of course, is milk volume and quality. That's what we're trying to, we're really aiming for. But along with that comes udder and teat structure to maintain, be able to make a lot of milk. That udder to hold up over years of production. The udder and teat structure is a highly important trait for dairy goats, along with docility. We got to be able to get these goats up and handle and work with them every day or twice a day even for milking them. So docility is very key trait in the dairy goat selection. Talking about our common dairy breeds, There's a lot of those breeds. There's some other breeds in here. I haven't included all the breeds. There's some other ones out there, but the ones you most commonly see are the Nubian, the La Mancha, the Alpine, the Nigerian Dwarf, the Sana, and the Toggenburg. They all have kind of different characteristics. They're known for both from body size. They're different milk. Some are higher protein, some are higher butter fat, some are higher volume milk producers. Of course, like your Nigerian Dwarf, a very small frame goat, very efficient, doesn't require a lot of feed, but has lower volumes of milk. So if you're going to go in the dairy goat direction, kind of look up and think about what kind of milk quality you want to produce, what milk characteristics you want. And that's going to depend on how you're going to market. Are you making cheese? Are you making hand cream and soap? Those sort of things may help you decide which dairy goat breed is the best for your situation. I want to give a little bit specific on producing breeding stock. A lot of people, they start off, okay, I'm going to start breeding some meat goats, or I'm going to start breeding some dairy goats, and then they start saying, oh, well, I have a goat, I'm going to sell it for breeding stock. If you're going to be a little bit more intentional, if you're going to sell breeding stock, it takes extra levels of management, but also extra expense kind of comes in there. You need to be very selective in the genetic lines, tracking those genetic lines, buying registered stock. Majority of the time, keeping those registration papers. So there's extra levels of management and expense that go into selling breeding stock. Yes, you can just sell off of kind of grade animals, but most of the time when someone's wanting to buy a buck to improve their herd, they want to buy specific lines. They want to buy, one with a proven genetic track record, and they want to know exactly how that animal's been cared and bred for when they go to buy it. So thinking about the markets for breeding stock, registered and purebred, that's the majority of it. You're going to want registered stock, purebred stock is what you're going to be selling most of the time. There are some commercial hybrids out there, particularly in the dairy side, but also somewhat in the meat goat side. They have mixed 2 or 3 specific breeds. They have specific standards for mixing those breeds to sell those hybrids. And then there's performance tested. So you can send goats off to go. I know that Maryland has a big performance testing program where they actually take the goats, they weigh them, and take some characteristic traits at the beginning of a set time period. Say they start off with 60-pound kind of weaned goats. They let them graze on pasture with some supplemental feed for 90 days. They calculate how much weight did they gain, how much muscle mass did they gain, what was their parasite resistance during the trial, that sort of thing. And then they sell those goats based on the performance data. And people want, I want to improve the growth rate in my herd. I'm going to buy a buck that is maybe gaining, 0.6 of a pound a day. And I hope that's going to pass on to the offspring to be a faster growing, more efficient goat. The key thing with breeding stock, when you're selling breeding stock, is, most of the animals you raise, or part of the animals you raise, should not be sold as breeding stock, especially when we're selling bucks. Probably the top 1/3, maybe even the top 125% really should only be sold for as a breeding stock. You only want to sell the animals that have the best characteristics, are the best in your herd to pass on those genetics. You don't want to be passing average, and below average animals should not be sold in general as breeding stock. You want just the ones that are going to improve the breeding program of who you're selling them to. So in general, it's going to be a small percentage of males and about half the females. The top half are the ones that should be sold on for breeding stock. That lower half are ones you're going to be selling in towards the meat market. Making sure if you're selling registered animals that they're meeting the breed standards. A lot of these breed registries have very specific things on whether it be coloring, certain markings, certain structural faults that are automatic disqualifications. Animals that have poor teat structure are not wanted and should not be sold onto breeding stock to bring those, pass those traits on to other herds. And then, of course, reproductive performance. You want ones that are the most fertile. If you're selling dairy, having the right characteristics for milk production, the highest milk producers, the highest butter fat, highest protein levels, that sort of thing is very important for breeding stock. The show industry is one that's a high risk, high reward. It's kind of a very specialty market. It takes a lot of money, and it's very challenging to break into if you don't kind of come into from the show knowledge of the show industry. To break into raising breeding stock or raising animals for the show industry can be challenging. And the main reason is because it pushes the envelope. We're pushing animals to the extreme, whether that be even in the show side, right? It can be from show on the breeding stock side. It can be on the market goat side. It can be in the dairy side. We're always pushing the animals kind of to the extreme of what is acceptable in the general production system. They tend to chase trends. The show industry is very trendy. They want one season or for a few years, they want the animals look one way, and the next, then all of a sudden something changes and they want to look kind of the opposite way. And so it chases trends, and sometimes it puts emphasis on single traits that can be unbeneficial to general production in kind of commercial production. And in the show industry, reputation sells. And reputation brings money. So you have to have your animals out there in the show ring, winning, placing high for people to want to buy the animals. And it takes a large amount of capital requirement. You're having to buy high dollar animals, bring in high dollar semen. A lot of times they're now doing a lot of embryo transfer work, artificial insemination in these show animals. They can be very high. Takes a lot of capital requirements up front to break into the industry. There's some people that are making a lot of money. A lot of people are barely breaking even. And there's some people that do it for a few years and lose a lot of money and then drop out very quickly. It's an industry that can look alluring from the outside, but inside it's kind of challenging one to break into. So maybe you've made that decision about, okay, I want to get goats. I'm going to get dairy goats, or I want to get boar goats, or whatever. You've made the decision about, okay, I know I want goats. I know what kind of goats I want. Now, what things do I need to know? And we're going to talk about a few of these things: the fencing, the facilities, making sure we have good predator protection, how we purchase our animals, and then how to gain more skills and knowledge. Fencing is key. It happens all the time. As an extension agent, someone calls me and says, I bought some goats. Now tell me what I need to do to put up. What kind of fencing do I? They're getting out. What kind of fencing do they put up? They put the cart before the horse. When you're going to decide to buy goats, you need to have your pastures established and your fences in before you ever purchase your first animal. And for goats, the rule of thumb is if it won't hold water, it won't hold the goat. That's kind of the joke. And it's very true. We talked about the inquisitive nature of goats. They are very, they will get out of a lot of, so if your fencing is subpar, you will find out very quickly if you have goats. They like the challenge of trying to get out. The grass is always greener on the other side of the fence for a goat. So for goats, most of the time we're going to go with a woven wire fence. It's the most predator proof and the most resistant for goats to be able to get out of it. And we want to get the small size, small ruminant or horse wire or no climb wire for our goats that has the very smallest size in the block, so the wire size, because goats are prone to stick their head through. And if your goats have horns, a large open woven wire fence acts as a gill net. They stick their head through to go get some leaf they saw on their side of the fence, and they pull back, and now their horns are trapped, and they can't figure out how to get back out. So we want to have the small size whole woven wire. We want to make sure that woven wire is very close to the ground because goats will go under the fence, and we want to make sure that they can't have too many things where they can jump over. So we need the fence needs to be fairly high as well. When we're building that fence. And a lot of times we want to put a hot wire on the inside of that fence to keep the goats off of. They love to rub on a woven wire fence and use that as a scratching post or climb up it with their front feet. And they'll push that fence out and stretch it out and stretch it down. And eventually they'll make their way under it or over it because they've stretched it. So putting a hot wire on the inside to keep them off of climbing over the wire is another thing that can be very beneficial. High tensile electrified wire will also work. You need multiple strands of that wire. Usually a 6-strand fence is needed for goats. And I recommend having at least 1 or 2 of those wires being a ground wire, meaning going back to the ground rod with the other wires being hot. Goats are very small footed and they don't conduct electricity very well. In the heat of the summer, when we get dry soil conditions, goats a lot of times can pop right through electrified fence if it doesn't have a ground, one of the wires going in the fence as a ground wire, because they don't ground very well back to the soil. If you're just using ground rod, trying to make a connection through a ground rod going back to the fencer, a lot of times they can pop through with almost getting no charge at all. So having what we call an alternating fence for hot wires and ground wires and a high tensile fence is really a must for high tensile fence for goats. Facilities. We talked about goats. They're prone to cold, wet weather. They need some barns, particularly times when they're kidding and they have young animals. They need barns and structure to keep them dry out of a drafty and cold, wet environments. We need barns for them to be housed in. We also need to be thinking about, holding pens and working facilities for managing those goats. We want to have some areas where we're going to be catching them to trim their feet. Do we want to get a tip table? Do we have pens for when we're kidding out? We can lock them up. If we have dairy goats, areas for holding as they're getting ready to come into the milking parlor, areas maybe we're holding them as they come out of the milking parlor, that sort of thing. So thinking about those holding pens and working facilities. And those really got to match up with the number of goats that you plan to have and what kind of goat production you have as well to match what you need there. Predator protection is another one that is really key. Goats are very prone to predators, almost as prone as sheep. Sheep are probably the most prone, but goats follow the next. In particular, somewhat to coyotes, but primarily to dogs, to domesticated dogs. They think it's fun. When they get in the fence, they think it's fun to go chase, fun to go grab them by the hind legs, and then sometimes maybe even to grab them by the throat and kill them. And they can cause a lot of damage very quickly to a goat herd, especially young goats. And dogs can really decimate. I've heard some real horror stories and had some personal experiences with that as well, of causing some major damage to goat herds of dogs. Coyotes, they tend to come in, they kill one, they might come back a couple nights later, they'll kill another one. And the main way to tell whether you're having coyote predation or dog predation, coyotes will actually feed on the animals they kill, where dogs will just kill them and play with them and then leave and not actually have any consumption of the dead carcass. But I always suggest, if you're going to get goats, get yourself a livestock guardian animal. It's the best insurance policy for that investment you're putting into those livestock animals. There's some different options. We're going to have a whole presentation coming up in February in January on livestock guardian animals and livestock guardian dogs in particular. And I recommend everyone come back and listen to that presentation, because there's some really interesting things, some key things you need to know about owning livestock guardian animals and dogs in particular in the training and such. But your options are livestock guardian dogs. They're ones I always say they are both offensive and defensive. They bark loudly to set a territory. They urinate around the perimeter. These are how dogs and coyotes talk to each other. They create territory, they bark, they urinate to mark those territories. They respect territories in general. Guardian dogs are very good at that kind of that defensive, and then they go on the offense if something comes in and attacks, or comes in there, they actively go over and chase them off. Llamas and donkeys are also some other viable options. They're very easy to have with sheep and goats because they graze right along with them. They blend in very easily, but they are very much more just on the offense, right? They, an animal comes in, they go to chase it off. They aren't out there marking a territory and saying, hey, we are, this is our territory, like that. So the animals are more likely to come into the fence than respect that territory. Same thing goes along. If you're going to have small ruminants, sheep and goats, you need to have some firearms to help protect your animals. And also, a lot of times in that case where you sometimes need to put an animal down, it's also important. And choosing the firearm appropriately with where your farm is located is very key. We got to think about the backstop, what's behind us, what's next to us when we're shooting that gun if a dog comes in. And that's one of those things. If you have an animal that's attacking and killing livestock, you have to stop it. They're going to keep coming back, whether it be a coyote or a dog. They're going to keep coming back because they know that's a source where they're either getting that excitement of chasing or they're finding that food source. So you're going to have to kill that predator to stop the situation most of the time. If you're going to use a shotgun, if you're in more of a close environment, whether around barns or houses or whatever, you have neighbors close by, shotguns with double-aught buck, very effective for bringing down predators. If you have some more distance, you have a decent backstop where you can shoot from more of a distance. A rifle such as 17 HMR, 22 mag, 223, and 30-30 are all good options for bringing down predators that are damaging livestock. All right. So when we go to purchase our first animals, there are some really keys, do's, and don'ts. And I'm going to hit the don'ts first because the don'ts are really big. Do not go buy your livestock from the stockyard. You're going to be buying someone else's problems. Stop and buying animals from the stockyard. People are bringing in animals that they no longer want to have on their farm. A lot of times, especially if they're older, males or females, you're buying someone else's culls with issues. You're also bringing home every disease that every other person has brought to and commingled in the last months coming through that stockyard. So even if you go buy younger kid goats, you're likely going to be bringing home a whole host of problems into your operation that you don't want to bring. So do not buy breeding stock and starting your operation from the stockyard. Also be very cautious of buying off of Craigslist. You can find some good things off Craigslist, but you got to be very cautious about buying off Craigslist. I see a lot of people that go and buy at the stockyard and then resell on Craigslist. So be very cautious. If you're going to do that, ask some questions. Are you breeding your own animals? That sort of thing. I know Dalton brought up bottle babies. People love bottle babies. Bottle babies are not great breeding stock. If you want a pet, a bottle baby is a great thing, but bottle babies do not make great breeding stock. First of all, a lot of times they grow slower. They don't reach maturity. They don't reach their full potential from that standpoint. And then you have to question, why were they a bottle baby in the first place? Because their mama didn't have enough milk. That means they have the genetics not to have enough milk to raise their babies, that sort of thing. So I recommend do not buy bottle babies as breeding stock. Don't buy someone else's pet. If you want a pet, you can buy someone else's pet, but do not buy someone else's pet as breeding stock. And then don't buy someone else's culls to start your own herd of goats. You have to be willing to be able to spend the money. Don't go the cheapest option you can when you get ready to start your own operation. If you're buying cheap animals, you're going to wind up with cheap animals and problems. So do buy from a reputable breeder. Go to the farm, talk with them, see how their kind of production practices they're using. Are they similar to what you're going to plan to do? Buy from production sales. A lot of times you'll find groups of people, they're consigning 2 or 3 animals from multiple people in production sales. There's lots and lots of online sales. There are challenges that come with online sales, especially if you're buying animals from long distances away. They may come from a very different environment than what you're raising your goats on. So, hey, here in North Carolina, if I typically try not to buy goats that come from north of me and really far west. If I'm buying goats out of Kansas, or I'm buying goats out of Pennsylvania, that's a very different environment than we have here in Eastern North Carolina. And personal experience tells me those goats do not perform as well in our environments because they have not been selected for our environment. So there's some challenges with buying from online sales. Buying bred females. You want to start your herd of goats. Buying a bred female is a great way to start it. Here you have a mama coming in, and she's going to have offspring right away. And maybe you'll be able to, turn around, sell that offspring or keep that offspring to build up your own herd. Buying mature females. That's another great way. Buy someone's 2 or 3-year-olds. Maybe they're downsizing a little bit. As long as you're not buying those cull animals, so ask those questions. Does she have a good bag? Has she had issues with parasites and worms? Why are you selling this female? But buying mature female is a great way because you take and put her right into your breeding program. If you go buy little doe kids, you're now talking 6, 8, 9 months before they're going to be ready to breed. And then you're going to have another, 6 months before they're going to have kids after that. So you're slowing down that process of returning it on your investment. And then buying rams and bucks at breeding age, especially when you're starting out. I don't recommend going out and buying a little weanling buck Because bucks there's a challenge and a process to learn how to properly develop and grow that animal. And if you have no experience with goats, it's hard to know when you're looking at a just weaned buck kid what he's going to grow into and if he's going to meet your requirements. When you buy a buck, let's say a 9-10 month old or a yearling or 2-year-old buck, you know exactly what he is and what he's going to be able to do for your herd of goats. And then and Dalton covers a bit, gain more skills and knowledge, find your extension agent, really key. Find your closest vet with small ruminant knowledge, get to know them, establish a vet client patient relationship. You are going to need medication, particularly antibiotics. If you have goats, you're going to need antibiotics, and the only way to get those is with a vet script. And if you have a good relationship with your vet and they know that you know what you're talking about, you can just give them a call, say, hey, I have a sick goat with some respiratory disease. Can I come pick up a bottle of some antibiotic to treat that? They say, okay, yes, I know that you know what it is. Just drop by the office. I'm not going to have to come out for this $200 field call to look at your goat and then give you the antibiotic. I can write the script. You can pick up the bottle and treat your goat. So make sure you have a good relationship with a vet who knows something about small ruminants. As Dalton said, joining an association, a great way to gain knowledge. Find a mentor. Find someone else who is also raising goats in a similar way that you want to raise, where you can talk with them about the situation you're going through. I have had this experience. I'm thinking about doing this. What are your thoughts? What are your experiences? That can be really key to having a good start, is having a mentor. Attend conferences and trainings such as this. And then read, follow, watch online. There's plenty of folks out there doing raising goats in all different kinds of ways and sharing their experiences, and you can learn from those experiences very readily. Few key things in preparation for owning small ruminants, and goats also. You got to know yourself and be able to prepare to deal with things you may not deal with every day if you don't own small ruminants. Particularly things like blood and pus, sickness and death. If you own goats, you will experience death. Goats are extremely hard. They hide their sickness and they will die on you with the slightest little thing. You think like, oh, it didn't look like that sick, and then there it is dead. And it can be a very emotional thing to deal with. You spent all this money, time, you tried to save it, and it still died on you. And I will tell you, there is an emotional hardness that comes with raising small ruminants, because you will learn about death in a very different way and how it's not that uncommon. And then there's very little you can do sometimes to stop it. Hard physical labor. When we trim their feet, when we're deworming them, you're going to have to be physical of holding a goat, wrestling a goat down, picking its legs up. There's a lot of physical labor, moving hay, that sort of thing, picking up 50-pound feed bags. There's a lot of physical labor that goes with caring for goats, and it comes with a lot of stress. If you don't need extra stress in your life, goats may not be the right thing. They can be silly and funny at times and a great stress relief, but there are many times when they cause a lot of stress in your life as well. So that's something else to know, that you're going to probably have stress if you have goats. Kind of finally, the keys to profitability is having a low death rate, keeping those animals alive, and that requires good management. Keep them grazing. The more often they're out there grazing, harvesting their own feed, the less likely you are to have to spend money. You're going to be spending less money on that expensive feed and hay. Keeping your birth rates high, not losing them at birth, and that requires that stress comes at that time frame, and managing and making sure those animals are healthy, they're dry, they're up, they're nursing, that sort of thing is kind of key. Culling animals that are low performing, hard doing, always sick, always having foot issues, always wormy, those animals, getting rid of those animals that are not performing up to par, or even just a general rule of thumb, if you can afford to do it, the bottom 1/3 of your herd should be sold every year. You keep back the top 1/3 of your offspring that you're raising and sell the bottom 1/3, and you'll keep moving your herd of goats forward. So culling is very important to maintaining a profitable herd, and making sure that you buy genetics that fit your operation. Buy animals that come from someone that is maintaining and raising their animals in a way that is similar to how you want to raise your animals, particularly in goats in particular. There are a lot of people who raise goats in dry lot. You take a goat off a dry lot and try to put it on a pasture, it doesn't always work out well. If you are you wanting to raise your goats in more confinement, and you're buying animals that are coming off pasture, does not always fit. So buy someone who is raising their animals in a similar fashion to how you want to raise your goats. And with that, that's it. We're going to take questions at the end. Here's my contact information there. If you want to get a hold of me, I'm always willing to talk over with folks about goats. So that's what I got for you this evening.
Thanks, Andy. And again, like Andy said, we'll take some questions at the end. We've got some coming in. So if you got any, just don't forget them, or if you want to put them in the chat, we'll get to those towards the end. Now we'll turn to Stephanie Carter. She again is the owner and operator of Ithaca Acres Creamery that is in Rayford, North Carolina. So I will turn it over to Stephanie.
Okay. Oh, so is it my turn?
You're a good go, Stephanie.
Okay. Hold on just 1 second.
If you
I guess
guys
I'll start
bear with
probably.
us, I'm going to help Stephanie with her slides.
Thanks, Liz, because I'm inside a creamery and the signal is stuck right now. So that's why Liz is helping out. All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Stephanie Carter. I'm an operator of Acres Creamery. So we'll be talking about goats today. I titled it Dairy Goats for Dummies. Don't take that personally. All right, Liz, you can do the next slide. So I didn't have a huge amount of time to hop in, see what other subject matters previous to on the Zoom call. So hopefully everybody got a great, sounded like a really good intro to goats in general. I don't do Zoom calls very often, so just bear with me on these. So basically, how did I get into goats? It all started in 4-H. I think I got my first one when I was 9, and then showed pretty much 9 through, I guess, 18, and before going into college at App State. And so started that interest with the goat world. So learned a lot there, but those were all Boer goats that we showed in the goat world. I mean, in the 4-H world. And so the dairy goats came after college, went to App State, got a marketing degree, came back to the farm, which was definitely not what I thought I was going to do. And then we purchased our first dairy goats in 2016. That was Sadie. I think that was Sadie. Gosh, Pearl, and let's see, a few other ones. And so Katie, I think it was Katie Sue. And so started playing around with some dairy products. Oh, wait, let's go back for a second. So after graduating from college, coming back to the farm, we kind of looked at different things and said, what can we do on our farm that's a little bit different and that could be a niche? And so we had already had chicken houses. We grew for Purdue. We had cattle that we were just doing a cow-calf operation. We had some goats that my younger sister was still doing in 4-H. And then let's see, what else were we doing? A few others. So we kind of thought, what can we do on our farm that is needed and that's a niche? And so we were looking at pasture raised pork. We thought about a few other things with finishing out beef cattle, offering some other additions, but at that time we didn't have a farm store, so some of those things didn't really make a lot of sense. So then we thought, well, we have a lot of experience in goats, and I have a marketing degree, and the interest in goat dairying and dairy farming has just catapulted in the last 50 years. But prior to that, it's really been unknown to us in the U.S. Goat meat and goat milk are worldwide eaten and consumed a lot more than cattle products are, but in the U.S., beef and dairy, most dairy farming is with cattle. So we've got generational dairy farms that are mainly beef cattle, and then the goat farming and goat dairy farming has really started in the last. And Dr. Weaver can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think the last definitely 50 years we've really started doing that. There might have been some before that, but really started showing interest and has picked up probably in the last like 25-ish, really. The EU was subsidizing a lot of cheese and a lot of products, and they still do some, but they've reduced the subsidies, which has allowed us American farmers to kind of compete with a lot of food products and dairy products coming out of the Netherlands, France, and some of the other European countries. So we kind of saw that as a good option because, let's see, 2016-ish, I guess, that was, we were looking at different options. And so talked to a lot of different people. And I can't remember how it initially started with, let's get dairy. I can't remember who the first dairy farmer we spoke with and why we decided dairy goats, other than we had a lot of experience with goats. I can't remember the first initial conversation we had, but somebody had a big impact at the beginning with us. And so that kind of led us on to a journey. So we started visiting a lot of goat dairies. And then with the purchase of our first couple of them, we started playing around with some product production. And then, but in the meantime, we went and visited a whole lot of dairies all throughout the state of North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Vermont. I did a cheese making class in Vermont, Colorado, went to Aspen. Oh man, I know, really, that sucks. We went to Georgia, South Carolina, so a bunch of different places to get a lot of different information. And then, then we had our own dairy animals to, like I said, to play around with as well. And then we were actually officially started our goat dairy in 2018. August of 2018 was when I received my license to start cheese production. So we built we built our creamery from the ground up, which was very daunting at the time. And so that was why it was so important to visit a whole bunch of other dairies. And then we ended up hiring a consultant out of Missouri, and he was able to really help us design our building, which if you come down and visit, you can definitely see. All right, Liz, next to the next one. So it's a little bit back around a story of who we are. So you think you want to get into dairy goats. I asked this question because we're ready to go to the next slide. Sorry, Liz. So before you get into dairy goats or getting into goats in general, I threw these questions in here for everybody to kind of look at because they take some time. And then, kind of wondering, okay, first off, why are you interested in dairy goats in the first place? What are your goals with your herd? So your herd can be any size, but you need at least 2. And it can be 2 to, whatever. Nobody's counting in the goat world. That's what we've realized. Don't count your goat. Nobody wants to confess how many goats they actually have. Do you have time to commit to this venture? This is a big one that a lot of people, especially during COVID, had gotten into the pandemic, got into a lot of things that they thought they were going to have a lot of time for, whether this is pets. So now our animal shelters are overloaded, whether this is dairy goats, whether this is chickens were a big thing. And so then once that ended and then they had to go back to their jobs, they then had all these animals that they really didn't have time to commit to in the first place, but they had jumped into this venture. And then they realized that there were a lot of other, okay, sorry, those comments I don't think are for me. But so there's a lot of reasons to think about is do you have the time to commit to this venture with the job that you currently have, or what are your future goals in your career first? And is it farming or homesteading? What products do you want to produce with the goats or with the meat goats, dairy goats, fiber goats, whatever? What are your purposes? And another big one are, do you have neighbors that would be bothered by goats? Because goats are notorious for getting out. I know the gentleman before me talked about fencing. And it is very important to have the right type of fencing and make sure your goats stay out, because you will get to know your neighbors really well very quickly if your fences don't work. So sometimes that's good, bad, and ugly. And then, so you definitely want to make sure you know who your neighbors are and if they're okay with that, because you will probably have a Karen in the group. Somebody really likes to talk. And then, so, making sure your neighbors know, that's a possibility. They do talk. The bucks do smell terrible. So if you have a buck on the farm and you've got anybody knows close to you, you will smell him, and he stinks and he makes lots of noises, and it's just nasty during rut season. So I would encourage each one of you to kind of think about, those were some of the questions. I'm sure there's plenty more I can think of, but on the fly, those were things I thought I would encourage everyone to really look at before even purchasing animals or spending time with that. And then especially if you're sick, who's going to take care of them, and coming up with a contingency plan for, like the gentleman said, for if they die, they are going to die. So where are you going to bury them? That's very, very important. And make sure you don't get an animal that you can't take care, that you can't handle if it's burying. I had a friend call me up. This was a couple months ago, asking me if I can haul a tractor 25 minutes down the road to bury her. I can't remember. I think it was a horse, that she lost a horse. Well, I said, no, I'm not going to go put my tractor on a trailer and haul it down there. I said, you're going to have to find a way to dispose of your animal. It was a really sad situation, but that's not my job to dispose of your animals. So I think those are just important things you need to really think about before getting into the goat world. All right. So going into the goats, after you've thought about those questions, and then you realize, hey, you know what? I do have the time. My neighbors are fine with it, and I want dairy goats. I threw in the top 7 most popular dairy goat breeds in the United States, and I guess worldwide. I may be missing. There's others, but these are the 7 top popular ones. The Alpines, they are great. They have erect ears. I had some pictures, but my slideshow wasn't allowing me to upload a lot of pictures. So y'all can look these up on your own time. But the Alpines, they have good temperaments. They have erect ears. There's very particular types of color patterns. So a lot of this stuff is very important to know if you're going to purchase an animal, because I will tell you, there are lots of people that will screw you over when it comes to Nubians and Boer goats, and especially Nubians, because people know Nubians. And so if they're big floppy ears, they claim to be Nubians. And there's a lot of people who will say, oh, this is a Nubian, and it's really not. But you just have to, so a lot of these things you need to know yourself before you go look at an animal and say, okay, I now know what an Alpine looks like, and these are the color patterns. Or Nigerian dwarf, because there's plenty of people, especially if you're buying kids, who might say, hey, this is a Nigerian dwarf. And then 6 months later, when they're not 75 to 90 pounds, they're 110, you're going, okay, this is no longer Nigerian dwarf, and somebody screwed me over. So there's a lot of, important things with knowing your breeds. So different ones. So the, and also like different, back to your goals, what are you trying to do with them? So say the Saanen is what we call, in the dairy goat world, we call that the Holstein of the dairy goat world. So they produce the most amount of milk, but their butter fat is really low. So their butter fat's like 2.5% max, but they may be producing 1.5 gallons to 2 a day. So do you want volume? Are you trying to drink the milk? That would be a great option for you. Alpines, so I'm just going to go down the list real quick. Alpines are kind of a medium producer, so 3/4 gallon, maybe a little bit more if you've got a really heavy producer. And most dairy breeders, I'm just going to talk in gallons, but a lot of dairy producers actually talk in pounds. So if you come across somebody who talks in pounds, you know what they're talking about. So they know what they are from a dairy background, but I'm just going to talk in gallons today. So Alpines, they're probably going to be producing 3/4 to 1 gallon, a little over 1 gallon, but their butter fat will be middle of the road, kind of like 3 maybe it's like probably like 2.75 to like 3.25 or so. Then you've got the Nigerian dwarf. Their milk production is going to be lower, so probably half a gallon to maybe 3/4, but their butter fat's going to be a lot higher, like 5 to 6%. Nubians, they'll produce about 3/4 to a little over a gallon, and their butter fat, they're super sweet, docile. They're the big floppy eared ones. The Nigerian dwarfs are the little ones. They're like, I think 75 to about 90-pound range. So a lot of people like those because they're great for, you can put a lot of those in a little area. But remember, if you want to hand milk them, they're most often their teats are really small. So, and you're going to have to get more milk. I mean, but if you want the high butter fat, it's great for producing cheese and other things like that, those byproducts that you're looking for. But their teats are really small. So you might be like, and that might be, that's not what I want to do. So I don't have Nigerian dwarfs, but I know that they're convenient for a lot of people. Another issue the Nigerian dwarf may have to think about is, okay, if they have a kidding issue and you have to go in there and figure it out, that's a lot harder for your hand to fit inside of a Nigerian dwarf than it is some of these larger breeds. And if you don't have a veterinarian that you can get a hold of and you have a good relationship with, I might encourage you to kind of stay away from that one, that breed particularly. But I mean, that's up to you to decide that manner. The Nubians are great. They're super docile. Their milk production is a little bit lower. They are, for me, a little bit more parasite prone, but they have a higher butter fat, which I do like. La Manchas are the funny ones with the very little teeny weeny ears. They're kind of cute. I guess they're so cute. They're so ugly. They're cute, but some of them are just ugly. So that's okay. We'll just call them ugly, but some of them are so ugly. They're cute, I guess. They are great. I really like that breed a lot. I have to look past the lack of ears, but that's okay. That's okay. There's more important things than that. That's not what really matters in the dairy goat world. So they can have a really high volume of milk. So they can be producing a gallon and a half a day. And their butter fat is up there as well. And I'll have to go look at this because I haven't updated I don't look at butter fat all the time, but I just think it's like 3.5 up to maybe 4%. So they're the only dairy breed that I know of, actually the only dairy breed that was actually created in the US. Most of these dairy goats can come from the Alps and different parts of Europe. Next, we have the Oberhausley. I don't have these, but they are very distinct with their coloring. And you'll know an Oberhausley when you see them, they have erect ears. And their milk production's good. They're kind of like an Alpine. I put Toggenburgs, Oberhausleys, and Alpines kind of in the similar category with their volume and their butter fat. And Sonnens. And like I said, I already talked about Sonnens a little bit. Another thing that you're looking for when you're looking for the picking the right breed, some of these are not very accessible in your area. So kind of looking for, another thing is that you might find accessibility. Sonnens, we're really getting some really good genetics. It used to be the West Coast really had all the good genetics when it came to Sonnens, Alpines, and Nubians. Those are going to be Nigerian dwarf, Alpines, Nubians, La Manchas, and Sonnens. Sonnens less so than the other. Let's see. I was trying to think of the easiest ones to find, which will be probably Alpines, Nigerian dwarfs, and Nubians. La Manchas are gaining popularity because of their butter fat and their volume. And Oberhausleys and Toggenburgs, those are definitely harder to find. And Sonnens are becoming more prevalent because of their volume. And I think people, especially people that are looking for milking goats, they like the volume, especially if they're trying to get the fresh milk and production for their families. They like the Sonnens for that milk production. But finding local breeders can be a hard thing. So you may be having to travel several hours. And especially for good genetics, you might travel some states for some good genetics. We've definitely done that. So, okay, next slide. So these are a little bit of our farm. So these are some of our cute pictures. This is one of our Nubians over here doing goat yoga. I think that was one of our first goat yoga classes. And yes, we do goat yoga. That's definitely a fan favorite. And then Sadie's our Sonnen over here. She's one of our matriarchs. She's she's passed away, which was sad, but she's lives on as she's our logo goat on our soaps and lotion products. And then I can't remember who the one in the middle was, but she's a cross. So these are the breeds that we've really liked are the Saanens because of their milk production, the Alpines, and they're really sweet. I really like their temperament. We try to have just all good temperamented goats, but you're going to get a crazy one in there for sure. And then I really started delving into and really liking the La Manchas a lot more than I knew I was going to. At first, it was the ears. I will tell you, I had thrown the whole breed away just because their ears I couldn't handle it. But that's me. So I've gotten past that, and I realized that they have so much more benefit to them. And then the Nubians, I like that. They're great for the yoga classes, and they can be lots of fun colors, and they're usually super personable. I look at them and think they're high most of the time, but they're not. And then we have crosses too, because you can get some really benefit out of what you have a cross between like a Saanen and Nubian that's called a Snubian. And there's some other fun ones too. So you may have a doe with really high milk volume, and then you want to add in some butter fat. So there's a lot of benefit to having some crosses as well. I don't try to do a lot of crazy crosses, but I usually do like 50-50. I do a lot of what's called experimentals. And I really find good success in those for sure. So, and that can also be with parasite control. That can help with a lot of other stuff as well. So as you're delving in and figuring out what goats so say you've asked the questions, you're okay with that. You've decided what breed you want to do. So what are some benefits to registered goat versus non-registered goats? So this is where you really want to encourage you to start looking at that and your goals and seeing what your goals are. And you need to make sure that these align with your goals, because you can spend a lot of money. You can spend a lot of money really fast when you're buying registered animals. And I had thrown up here, this was from a somewhat previous presentation about a Boer animals. But dairy goats can be somewhat similar products. But if you're producing, so say you get into the dairy goat world and your goal is to be producing breeding stock. Well, you're going to want all registered animals. You're going to want them from really good lines, and you'll want to be producing, you're going to be spending a lot of money up front. And that is, so that you'll be spending a lot of money up front. And that could, if you want to do that. But if you're looking for, say, just a couple of backyard animals to clear some brush, or you're looking for you're looking for some animals to milk, you don't necessarily need registered goats. There's goods, bads, and uglies, because the nice thing about, there's the goods and bads about having registered animals. They're going to cost a lot, but you can track their genetics. You can sell them for a lot more. You can go back and look at their milk records. You can look at, you'll know exactly how you're breeding. So if you're trying to breed for specific things, that will be a whole lot easier to be doing with registered animals. But like I said, if you're not wanting to spend a lot of money, and a registered dairy goat, I wouldn't spend, if I was buying registered, unless I'm buying a group, I wouldn't spend less than really $300. That would probably be my beginning point too. I don't know if I'd even, that would probably be my like low for that. When it comes to dairy bucks, I had thrown this in there. I don't usually spend, I buy all my bucks registered, because then that's really the only thing I bring in. I don't bring in, we've got a really closed herd, so I don't really bring in a lot of dairy does, but I bring in registered dairy bucks, so then I know exactly what lines I'm bringing in, and that really helps as I'm trying to improve, especially milk volume and butter fat. I can look back on their genetics and be breeding exactly what I want to be breeding into my herd. So all of my bucks I maintain are registered. And then when I sell them, I can sell them with their genetics behind them as well. And then when I bring in new, I know exactly what I'm bringing in. So that's what I do, but not all my does are registered. I do have several of them. I do have quite a few that are, but not all of my does are registered. And it takes extra time to be keeping up with the papers, tattooing, doing that. But like I said, if that's your goal is to be breeding stock, then that would make perfect sense. Other than that, you don't really need all of the other paperwork to go with it. And then let's see, I'm trying to think of anything else with the genetics. All right, I think I'm on to the next one, Liz. So when purchasing, and this was kind of the information that the gentleman also gave before me, which was purchasing animals, do your research. You need to know what you're looking for before you visit the farm. Like I said, you wouldn't believe how many people I know, and this may be you. Maybe you've been screwed over too, because somebody will come on to the farm. You'll say, you'll find a list, and it does happen often on Craigslist and some others, but there's plenty of ways to scam you on Facebook too, and that happens all the time. So be wary of that. Make sure you're finding reputable breeders. Make sure you know what you're looking for and questions to ask. Whether it's the teeth or the teats or the structure. Because you want to maintain, and that would be a discussion for another time, but you need to make sure you know exactly what kind of animal you're looking for, what breed you're looking for, what are their breed standards and their specifics before you go on visit a farm. You need to ask good questions. Is yours a closed herd? What do you breed for? What are you trying to, maintain here? Are you CAE, CL, Neonates disease free? Be careful of the posts and scams. Don't purchase any sick animals. I sell bottle babies all the time. So this will be something I'll disagree with the gentleman before me, because I do sell bottle babies all the time. I race in a bottle babies because we do on our dairy farm. I pull them off within a few days, and I don't let the dams raise them, and I bottle feed them their whole life. And I've done a great job with it, and they do terrific. But you do have to be wary if you don't have that down to a science. Don't just think you're going to buy a bottle baby and it's going to be perfect, because it won't necessarily be that way. But if you do it well, you can easily have an animal be the same size and the same breeding genetics. And dairy goats and dairies do that all the time, because they pull the kids off early because they need that milk to go into their cheeses or their other products, or to be sold as milk into that. So dairy cattle, dairy farms do this. And then goat dairies, cow dairies do that all the time. So you can get some great does. And I've bought bottle babies plenty of times, but I know who I'm buying from, because you don't want to buy, you're going to easily get scours. You could easily get a sick animal. Are they treated with coccidia? Are they on a coccidia preventative? There's a lot of questions to ask before getting into bottle babies. And when we sell bottle babies, I train the person that before they go, I have a whole list of information. They get a couple papers of information of how to specifically feed their animal, their kid, at what age, how much, what, when to add in different things, what feed, all that kind of stuff. We try to equip best so that animal has the best success level when they leave our farm. And then, but we sell bottle babies all the time. But be careful, don't purchase a sick animal. If you get there and somebody didn't keep their word, that's fine. Do not think that you have to then purchase the animal, because if they screwed you, don't just walk away. Do not feel like you have to purchase an animal. Never, ever feel like you have to purchase something when you do that. So, all right, Liz, next slide. Okay, another big thing when you're buying dairy animals and when you're into dairy animals, this is just super brief, but you need to make sure that you realize that feeding a dairy animal and feeding a meat animal is totally different. They look totally different. I like to see like the boers and the meat animals. They kind of look like muscle, like a bodybuilder. And then you have the dairy animals, and they kind of look like more like a long distance runner. So they're totally different. They're bred for something totally different. And so they need to, when you're looking at minerals, when you look at feed, when you look at hay, And when you're lactating, that's going to take a tremendous amount of energy. That's the most amount of energy they expend in their whole life. And so they need to be fed to the peak, not overfed. You do have to worry about protein and too much protein, and that could cause liver issues down the road. Too much calcium could cause it. Make sure you're not, with their bucks, different things like that. But you need to be feeding them. They're going to take a tremendous amount of energy in order to have that milk production that they're going to be expected to produce. So just understanding that when you're feeding a dairy animal, you're feeding it differently than you're going to feed your meat animals. And then, so knowing some of the items that you can be producing, and then back to your goals and thinking about what you want to produce. But here's just a great list I just put together. There's some other items that you could be adding, and I kind of categorize some of them. So milk is number one, that I think everybody can draw that conclusion. And then cheese and dairy products. So the cheese, I kind of just said dairy products. I just kind of broad spectrum dairy products. That could be everything from sour cream, anything you can think of, right? So cheeses, any cheese you can make with a goat milk. That you make with a cow milk, you can make with goat milk. Mozzarella and Swiss are a lot harder. Swiss, it just doesn't develop with the cultures. It's hard to develop those bubbles with the goat milk just because of how the makeup of that milk is. And then mozzarella can be made, but it's a little bit harder. Butter is also a hard one because goat milk is it's called naturally homogenized because the fat globule is a lot smaller, so they don't really rise to the top like the cow's milk does. So you don't really have that heavy whipping cream, and you can't get that heavy cream like you can just scoop off the top of, especially like a Jersey milk who has a lot of cream. You can't just scoop that off of a dairy goat dairy milk. You can get a little cream for sure, but some products are just a little bit harder. You can make soaps, lotions, there's a lot of awesome bath and body products you can make. And the goat milk has wonderful properties for your skincare. Then you can I just threw caramel sauce in here, but you can that's called cajeta. You can do goat meat. You can take the fat. So when we do goat meat, here on our farm and our store. And so when we take them to the processor, we always get that fat back because you can take that fat and you can make it into soap. You can cook with it, but it does have to be rendered before. It won't come back to you rendered. You'll have to render that. That's a process itself. And then hides, you can do that as well. If you're processing these animals on your own, you can take those hides and do whatever with that. I have not, and at the current moment, do not have a desire to mess with hides, but there's just some list of some items that you can make with goat milk. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I should have rephrased that title. Wow. I should have just said products you can make with goat. So, oh well, skip the milk part with the goat fat. And so let's see. Oh, here's some items that we make on our farm. We're a grade B, meaning, so there's grade A and grade B in the goat world. In the dairy world, grade A allows you to sell pasteurized milk, sour cream, kefir, cottage cheese, butter, yogurt. I think you're getting the picture. So it's not that our dairy isn't licensed. When we built our creamery, we built it with a capability that could be grade A. We did everything right. So everything's capable of doing that. I just haven't purchased a couple pieces of equipment to make me grade A. That's a goal down the road, but I don't need to spend $30,000 right now for grade A production. But that's just kind of, for me, the only thing that holds me back from being grade A right now is the fact of a couple pieces of equipment. So what we produce, our main production is cheese. Cheese is definitely up there. Soaps, lotions, foaming soaps, other bath and body products. We do a lot of wholesaling. So we sell our cheeses to a lot of restaurants. Then we package it and we sell a lot of containers out. Then we sell all of our bath and body products to then we sell a lot of bath and body products here on our farm. We started a store back, when did we start the store? There's some awesome grants out there, just an FYI. That was the side note. But UMO, the University of Mount Olive, has some awesome grants that are small. So we got a grant in 2020, I believe, to help us put a farm store on, and that's been a huge. So we opened that in 2021, I think, into 2021, and so it's been a really huge benefit because now customers can come to us. We do a lot of retailing with all of these products. We also do meat. We've done that for a bit. We do breeding stock, and then I sell plenty of live goats that I know people are going to eat too. I don't name those. I don't get friendly with those, but they'd be the same ones that I would be sending to meat anyways. And then we also do a lot of other products on the farm. So we do beef, hay. We have our own hay field. We do hay. We do pick your own blueberries. And then, so definitely come visit anytime. And then you can see a little more. I'm trying to think of anything else I have that would be interest. I think that's it. Awesome. Anybody got any questions? How's it go from now?
I
Yeah,
think
we can
Adam's
up
in
everything
the-
up to questions now. We have a few in the chat. If anybody wants to go ahead and unmute, they can go and ask those while we get everything sorted out in the chat.
I'll just go back and I was talking with someone over here. Questions about grazing in woodlands. There are challenges and benefits to grazing woodlands. They said goats prefer grazing at head height and higher, and they love grazing in wooded, brushy cover. It's hard to sustain that over a long period of time. Woody trees and brush is much slower in recovery from grazing than grasses are. And so what typically happens, people use goats to help clear brush because the goats typically will graze it very heavily. They'll remove most of the leaves, a large portion of the edible tender part of the stems and tips. And the plant may or may not recover from that. And if they do recover, if you keep the goats in there and do a consistent grazing over a long period of time, every time it pops a new leaf off, the goat is eating it and the plant eventually dies. To maintain grazing a wooded area for a long period of time, what you need to do is short duration grazing with longer rest periods to allow those woody plants to regenerate, put new top growth on, store energy back down its root system so it can handle grazing. If you just throw goats into a wooded area, after a year or two, what's going to happen is they're going to clear out all the stuff that they can reach up to their back legs, and you'll be left, if you have kind of a mixed story forest where you have some mature trees and smaller brush underneath, basically it becomes kind of a savanna. They open the bottom up and remove all the woody material from below. If it's a recently cut over, they may clear it down entirely, where you're going to have more of a grassy habitat start to move back in. So it depends a little bit on what the wood lot looks like when you start grazing it, but without careful management, you're either going to move into an open forest, open understory forest if you have mature trees you're grazing into, or if it's younger, primary, secondary growth trees, less than 10 feet tall, they will pretty much clear that out to the point where it moves into a kind of more of a grass pasture and with no woodies left in there. If you don't do fast duration with long rest periods in those situations.
Andy, since you covered some of the fence stuff, we had a question earlier on. How high should woven wire fence be?
So those, like most of those come in the 48 or 42 or 45, 48, the 40-inch. I would stay away from the 36-inch fence, the shorter fence. Goats will jump over that. You could make the 36-inch fence work if you put a hot wire above it. So if you use a T-post or a wood post situation, you could use the 36-inch woven wire, but I would definitely want a hot wire above that to keep them from wanting to jump over it. You don't need like the super tall fence, but the general, the 40, most of it comes like in a 40 or 42-inch fence, maybe in a 45-inch fence. All those are perfectly good. The key is really making sure it's very tight. You have enough posts so they can't lift it up, particularly from underneath. If you have going across uneven ground, if you have a little area that it raises up the ground a couple inches off the ground, and they can get a nose underneath it, and the fence got a little bit of slack or loosens over time, they will get where they'll actually push that up and flip underneath it. So making sure your spacing on your posts is fairly close, is pretty close together, and that fence maintains good tightness. And if you have a storm or something come through, make sure you go out there and check it to make sure no branches or limbs have fallen down on the fence and pushed it down, because the goats will find that spot faster than you can imagine and be out.
We had one in the chat talking about some parasites, and I think could be answered on kind of meat goats and on the dairy side. I think the part of the dairy is towards the end of the question, but do you keep your goats on a preventative for parasites or treat as needed? Does it impact milk production when they are being treated or on a preventative?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So the dairy goats are on a dry lot. We let them out and they go to pasture they typically try to go to pasture a couple times, a couple hours a day. And then, but most of their time they're spent on a dry lot with plenty of space. And that dry lot, the important part about having a dry lot, if you do, is making sure that you do not overpack your animals on that, and that you clean and maintain them on a regular basis to prevent mastitis, to prevent coccidia from that area. So you're going through, so we clean them out, not every month. It kind of depends on how much, because they have outside access and they have inside access. So it really depends on how much. So the outside, we don't really clean. We do till up. We lime, and that is what will disrupt your coccidia. It is kind of a coccidia prevention. I saw another one, and I'll talk about that one, of the prevention that we use for kids. But the coccidia that we do because goats are going to all have coccidia shedding. So, and when you have them on a concentrated area, especially on a dry lot, you have to know that that's going to happen. So lime, you're going to need to disrupt that with the pH. And so instead of, you can go real acidic, you can go, we use a lot of lime. So we use lime, easy, accessible, buy it at Lowe's, throw out some bags, disperse that, and then kind of till that in. So we do that every time we clean out the dry lot areas. And that's a huge prevention for the dairy goats that we do. We also give them a copper bolus every 6 months. We do multi-min shots. I check, but I don't even worm my dairy goats. I worm them like once a year when they kid, and that's about it. So that I don't have to throw their milk away, because each drug that you use, each treatment for parasites, has a different withdrawal period, and so you're going to need to throw that milk away for whatever period that withdrawal is. So you need to make sure, if you don't state it there, that you check with your veterinarian if it's not stated on the wormer. And then for the goats in our pastures, because we have over 200 goats on the farm, and so then we have the pastures. We just pasture rotation. We use cattle as well. They get the copper boluses. We have a good mineral. They get checked on a much more regular basis. But a lot of that's what helps with the prevention of the parasites for those guys in the pastures. And then, let's see, quick prevention. So when I was talking about preventative of coccidia in kids, I use something called, there's Calf Pro, and you can put that in starting day 3. It's a liquid, and you can put that in to their milk. And so that it goes right in there, just mix that in, and that prevents them from getting coccidia, which then you won't have to treat for coccidia, because you hopefully prevented it through the what's that word? Prevention method, whatever I just said. And then sometimes words are hard, but so the prevention method. And then also I use the Calf Pro, but I use Probac C. Yeah, that's what I like. Probac C I like a lot, because it's got probiotics as well as the coccidia preventative. And then but that's if you're bottle feeding, and then you use a coccidia prevention in your method in your feed. So if you don't want to bottle feed, you just get them with a medicated pellet. As soon as they can start eating, just put that medicated pellet in front of them, and at just a couple weeks old, then they'll be fumbling around with that and getting the coccidia preventative through there.
Thanks, Stephanie. That worked on part of the next question. Somebody asked about some coccidia prevention that you mentioned, and Dalton also put in a link to an extension article. If you want to take a look at that, you can scroll up there. So we will scroll down to the next one. Are there any cost benefits to becoming grade A, or is grade B just as good? And I think Liz commented on that, but if you want to add anything on that, Stephanie, feel free to.
Okay, let me just read the question. Let me just see it real quick. Yeah, I mean, let's see, grade A. There could be, if you're trying to sell, like Liz said, fluid milk, pasteurized milk. You can't legally sell pasteurized milk without doing that. You can sell, if you get your pet license, you can sell pet consumption only milk. And I can see there's a lot of people who sell that because you can actually make a lot more money selling pet only milk than you can pasteurized milk. But I'm not condoning that at all. Don't take me wrong. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying that's you can do a lot better. That I've heard that. And so then, but there's some benefits if you're trying to get into grocery stores, if you're trying to get that big and you're trying to get into stores and you're, I don't know if it's, I can sell pretty much everything I want to sell at grade B with the cheeses, because I'm going to make a lot more profit margin. I make a lot more profit margin selling cheese than I will taking that another level, and it's what's called value added. And because everything, if you're value adding, which is basically anything other than selling, it's taking the milk and doing something with it. So if you're making cheeses, you're making ice cream, those are all what's called value added products. And if you're taking those products, you're going to make a lot more money with that than you'll ever with just selling milk. So yes and no. Eventually I do want to be grade A so I can sell that pasteurized milk. But in the moment, I don't think you need to. But it's all licensed. Like all of that has to be licensed through the NCDA. So grade B, grade A, you're getting your license through the NCDA. So both of those are licenses that you have to acquire in order to legally sell cheeses and everything else.
We had another question on apps that's recommended for keeping track of records. Liz did comment about using Google Sheets. I personally use Google Sheets on my cattle stuff that I use, but Dalton, Andy, Stephanie, do y'all use any type of data record software apps?
So we just use an Excel spreadsheet, so not similar in Google Sheets. The key is use whatever you're most comfortable with. If you don't feel comfortable, find something that it's easy for you to use and you like using, so that you use it to keep the data that you need. If you don't enjoy using it, or you're always fumbling with it, then you're going to be like, well, you may not put something in one time, or you do like, oh, I'll get it later, and then you don't. Choose something that's simple and easy and that you're very comfortable using, so that you use it consistently and every time you need to record data. And going along with that, to make sure you keep records, one of the key things, every animal needs to have an identification tag in there so you can keep records. If you don't have every animal identified, you cannot accurately keep records. And I can modify that. If you have only 2 or 3 goats, then yeah, you can probably keep track of them. If you get much over 5 or 6 head, maybe 10 head, you really need to have every animal tagged so that you can accurately keep those records, and choose those records to keep that most affect your profitability. If it's something that you're not super interested in, it's not really affecting, because there's lots and lots of things you can keep, like, there's birth weights and weaning weights. And if those things don't matter to you, don't worry about keeping them. And if they don't matter to who you're selling them to, don't worry about keeping. Keep those things that matter to you, and keep those things that matter to the customers that you're buying from you.
For our farm, all of our animals have EID tags, which acts as a scrapie tag. So we actually have an EID reader, and that's what we use. So it has its own software that we use. We don't have that because of the sheep, but we have a larger scale. I mean, because of the goats, but we have a larger scale sheep operation. So that's why we have it. So we use it for both. But all those ear tags have like a little microchip in them that we're able to scan, and that's how we keep track of all of our records. But that's not necessarily feasible for a smaller operation. They do make, I think there's like Alltech, Gallagher, Shearwell. There's several different brands out there that make readers. There's some that are more affordable that can pair with like your phone or iPad. And it does has its own like management style app that is more affordable for smaller operations. But like Adam and Andy said, I mean, it doesn't take much. It can be a pen and a book, or it can be a spreadsheet, just whatever you're going to do. If you're familiar with like Google Forms, you can create your own Google form where you just go in there and just enter that in every time, and it automatically puts it into your spreadsheet. But basically, whatever it is that you're going to actually do every single time. So if you're not very tech savvy and that's not your thing, then I wouldn't recommend anything in that realm. If you will go to your book every time and write it down, whatever method that is, that's going to be the best option for you. But yeah, there's tons of options out there for apps and softwares and all kinds of things. But whatever you're actually gonna do is the best option for you.
There was a question about how many calories a day that's recommended for newbies. And Liz had a really good answer for that. So different production statuses for livestock do have different caloric intakes or needs. So there's a lot of research-based information out there on the web. And if you talk to your local extension agent, they can help you kind of figure out how much feed and how much nutrients are needed for each species in that production cycle. So reach out to those specialists to help you with that.
And I think a lot of that, Adam, going real quick for the Nubians, it's not necessarily, it's not really necessarily breed specific. It's kind of, so it really depends on like, okay, what's the Nubian doing? Is she just, it's kind of just across the board for dairy, animals. It could be like, okay, is this a maintenance? Is this just maintaining? So there's recommendations for just maintenance. Is it breeding? Is it lactating? And then there's all recommendations for, what life cycle it's in. So if you're asking what, just a broad spectrum question about recommendation for a newbie, that would have to be that question needs to be a little more specific to have a good answer for that one anyways. But it's across the board, just not necessarily Nubian specific. I mean, I don't think anybody breaks it down quite that much. It's more just dairy goat, like the 4-year-old dairy goat producing half a gallon a day or something. That would get you a lot more specific answers.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. So does anybody else have any questions for this evening? While you're thinking of that, I did put in the chat earlier, and I will post it again, the links to the upcoming webinars, and then the link to the YouTube page that all these recordings will be posted on. So again, these will be recorded, and we will also, if you signed up through Eventbrite, we will send these recordings out of each one to that Eventbrite email that you signed up with. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. The last question I think we have is, what is the stocking rate for Nigerians and mini Nubians on a dry lot?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that question?
The last one, see if I can find it. It went away here. What is the stocking rate for Nigerians and mini Nubians for a dry lot?
Believe there's just I don't think there's a specific for mini. I mean, it's kind of just like 25 square feet, I believe. I think it's 25 square feet per animal for the dry lot. And but that's also what I would have recommendation for just shelter purpose too, I think, for having shelter. And Andrew can make any corrections he thinks, or anybody else that can jump in there and say anything too that they think. But I think it's 25 square feet for dry lot. It's got to be 25 square feet at least. And then, but we have a lot more than that. But especially because they have inside and outside access. I have the 25 square feet minimum for the inside access because when it's raining and stuff, they can come inside. But outside, there's plenty of space. I did see one about castrating. What was that one about? Castrating an animal over 6 months?
I saw that. Yeah, so there was someone that asked about castrating the buck after 6 months, and there are challenges with castrating bucks at later ages, especially after you reach sexual maturity. You're not going to be able to band those animals. You're going to need to have a vet probably have some anesthesia, some numbing there, and it's going to be a surgical castration where we'll be cutting and removing the testicles. We have to be definitely much more watching out for bleeding, and after the larger they are, the larger testicles are, and the more sexually mature the animal is, the more the blood flow, or say the more well developed the veins and the arteries are going to those testicles, there's gonna be a lot more blood flow. So there are more challenges, and the later the buck is castrated, the more likely he's still to show bucky tendencies of being aggressive, urinating on himself even after that castration. He's more likely to show those tendencies the later and the more mature he is. But outside of 6 months, I would definitely work with a veterinarian on castrating those older animals, because there's much more challenges to come with those larger animals from an animal welfare standpoint.
And I think, it kind of depends too on what breed. Like a Nigerian dwarf, this would have a huge impact. Like their balls are going to be really small. So it kind of, for me, it's like, okay, how big are their balls? Because I know some animals like lambs, holy crap, they mature quickly. It's like, but there's some animals don't, and it also depends on is it in the middle of the summer? Is it late spring, summer? I would never castrate an animal in the summertime, and that's just too much stress. So do it spring or winter or something like that, and you can get a lacerator on there. Or if you want to use like a Newberry knife, that wouldn't be any problem whatsoever. It's just really going to be how big the animal, and at that point, what are you trying to do with them? I don't like to castrate them super early because I really want them to get that growth. So I don't want to miss that growth. So I don't castrate super early because I'm going to lose a lot of growth in that animal. So yeah, I think seasons, and like I said, how fast they're maturing too.
And if there's nobody that's got any more questions, we do appreciate everybody joining us, and we look forward to seeing you for the next ones throughout the webinar series. And we'd like to thank again of the speakers we had tonight for doing the great 3 presentations that we did have. So everybody have a good evening. We do appreciate you joining us.